Okay, this room is getting warmer.
Warmer?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm cold.
Oh, interesting.
I'm always cold though, except for my hands. My hands are always hot.
That's the best thing though, because the cold hands means like you're really cold.
Yes. Yeah, as soon as any like extremities get cold, that game over.
It's like loose right? And then so you wind up in like line. There's two lines. And then there's two plus print. And then and then you pass the straights down line.
There. Right there.
Yeah, there's
No, I see that there are two.
70%. Oh.
And then.
Alright, I was never in a plugs.
How's it going today?
Never. What was that?
How are you doing today?
Good. It's a long week. Good.
Yeah. Weekend's almost here, and then we have our magazine due on Monday. So just so you know, some people are complaining that we only have a few days here.
That's how life works.
Just letting you know.
We can only push it out so much, and I think everyone would much rather have more time working on the passion.
So what do you mean by like, we have illustration?
For the magazine.
Yes.
So that can be inclusive of, seven average can be inclusive of the logo that you guys are creating.
Okay.
Maybe some icons, maybe, go nuts.
Okay.
Something that is illustrated.
Which you get.
Okay.
Do you have anywhere that you want?
I know.
But I think you still, like,
Anywhere you want. You're
You just
the
want
designer.
it's just an artistic, we'll be trying to get our magazine articles, like, right? It's not really like, actually like high fidelity. Will you count it as a high fidelity?
I can count, yeah, I will count it as a high fidelity. We're not working in
I have a
iterations.
debate going with Aaron. So he's arguing that you want us to design the logo for the Google Journal. And then I was saying that you said you wanted it to be like reminiscent of the artist that you're.
So the logo for the whole journal,
Yeah.
ideally in a style that is reminiscent of your.
But then, why would that, I thought that we were trying to design the logo, that's gonna be the actual logo that's gonna be used for the journal itself.
It'll be on your magazine cover, which will be included in the.
It's like,
It was not meant to be the
you and actually, like, affinity. Yeah. No, I'm not.
I know,
Like,
so the thing is, we were on the way there, and then I was just like, should I like, I knew the last time I came to that site and I didn't call you, you got angry, so I was like, okay, I'll call her, but I'll call you coming back. And then as we were going across, I think it's like there, I think it's one of these, I think it's one of these, and I was like, I'll call them when I get back, and I'm sure you can probably see after that. What if I do worse on that? And then as we were, just I know where it's at, I was like, you know.
So the house was being sold, so like I wanna go outside and get warm. You know, outside and was like, it's like.
Is that the
And I know
combined
that
or?
was
It's a combined, makes sense.
Well, you still live on the yard, like cycling to the.
It was a good, yesterday I slept like
Last Friday.
yeah.
That's 21 miles.
That's 21 miles on a big trip.
You're right.
15 kilometers,
What you got?
covering the distance.
How long does it take for you to like cycle?
Yeah, I think you're right. I got that. I think, I'm forgetting what that's like.
And then it's
Did you like it there?
Listen, no. Actually, it was quite nice.
Yeah, but it-
There's a lot of
yeah,
construction.
nice there.
you recall like
What?
you recall like you rejected no.
Yeah.
What was it? 2.5, right?
2.4.
2.4. And what was the threshold? 2.3.
1.96.
Oh, yeah, 1.96,
It's a alpha variable, right? So it's the same as what we did in the paper. It's literally the exact same
It
thing.
was over, I think what I did, I said the wrong alpha.
Oh, maybe that's why.
2.3 is not even.
It's 1%.
Yeah, that's 1%. It's not a one tail. It's a one tail five.
No, it's 1%.
Why? It's the exact same writing as all of them. That's what we were.
The format is the same, but it asks it.
Because it's saying that it went down.
I know, but that's just in the start of the file. At the end of it, it says doesn't recognize, doesn't actually create a change, which makes it a loop. It's the same thing that we had in the past.
Well, that's good.
I'm trying to see the MC.
You told me by saying that, like, if it goes down, everything was, okay, that's one alpha, it's going down, it's not saying.
Yeah, I know, but that was I did the same thing when we were doing the practices. I had this exact same thought, but then when I spoke to him about it,
Yeah,
he said since the first part of it mentions about how it improves it, so reducing that.
okay, good.
That doesn't really matter because at the end of it, it's calculating the change that happens with this, or try and find out what the change would be. I'm trying to figure out where I lost my paper.
You lost your voice.
It was out of like 144 and 48. 106 and 105. It's very weird because I got like 25.5.
It's unreal because
I bought this years ago.
Not about that, but no, you guys have one.
I got like
I'm
what's
not
the
saying.
same?
I like.
Sorry.
You got a half point on one.
Alright, let's get the show on the road, yeah? Just so everyone knows, I went into Canvas today and I made a couple of updates just to the way that the lab is structured. Because I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to kind of go and look at other grids outside of what I had originally listed and just kind of open up the space a little bit more. There are a couple of specific types of grids that I want to show you guys today. And the point of grids is really so that you can create more modular designs, right? Something that doesn't put text across the entire width of the document because we've learned that that's a little hard to read, right? So one of the first types of grids that I want to show you guys is what is called a manuscript grid. You might also hear this called a Van der Graaf canon. Both are totally acceptable. This is it is commonly known as a much older style of grid. So kind of like some of those manuscripts that we had looked at in the history of design lecture and even in some of the examples that I show in class. Manuscripts have this slightly asymmetrical design to the page, but when you look at it as a spread, it looks really nicely weighted. So there's a very particular slightly mathematical structure that it takes to get one of those set up. But once you set it up, as long as the page sizes stay the same, then your canon, your grid should stay the same as well. This is probably one of the hardest grids to set up, so I'm kind of starting at the top and I'll work my way back. Every single time that I ever have to make one of these grids, I have to go look it up myself. So it's not something that is expected for you to retain or remember. It is just that you know where to find it and that you kind of know what it looks like. I have linked into the lab it's really a blog article, but there's a lot of really good grid examples in there, and then I'll take some time to kind of show you guys how you might use a grid. So starting off with the manuscript grid or the Van de Graaff canon, it's really nice to use the line tool to help you get this set up. You always want to start with this by finding the center point in the page. Now here, what I've set up is called a spread. And actually, I should probably take a step back really quick and show you guys how I'm setting this up. Because InDesign won't naturally set up your document like this, so it can get a little bit confusing. I'll start at the top. I'll make a new document. This should hopefully look familiar to everyone. I'm going to change it to inches. In the US, our standard letter size is 8.5 by 11. For some of you international folks, that might feel a little bit odd. But 8.5 by 11 is the standard that we'll use here. And the reason for that is because when you have 8.5 by 11, if you multiply the 8.5 by 2, you get 17, right? So then you end up with what's called a tabloid size sheet of paper, which is 11 by 17. Sorry, did I do that correctly? I did, yes. So I've already got that set up here where my width is 8.5 and then my height is 11. The margins that you set up right now, just for this particular exercise, don't really matter because we're going to establish the margins in the way that we set up the grid. However, standard across the industry, a minimum margin of about 1/2 inch to 1 inch is pretty normal. I would say 1 inch is more normal than 1/2 inch. So I'll just, for right now, set mine to 1 inch. And then a bleed of 0.25 is also pretty standard for anything that might run off the page. Okay? So we've got that, and you'll notice that despite the fact that I had 2 pages listed in there, InDesign is only giving me 1 page. It's a little bit frustrating. There is in fact a second page, it's down here, but it's not set up as a tabloid, okay? In order for you to do that, I mean, yes, you could come down here, add an extra page, and then now you have a tabloid. But what about this one up here? You're going to end up with that in your PDF. It's going to be a little bit wonky. You don't want that. And then even if I come up here and I delete this page, it's automatically going to float to the top. So you have to do an extra step in order to get InDesign to get it to where you can just have a spread as a standard. So what you can do is you've got this little hamburger stack up in the top right of the pages section. You can click on that. And down here, you have 2 things that are checked. You have allow document pages to shuffle and allow selected spread to shuffle. I'll be honest with you, I don't know why they're named this way. You would think that if they were checked, they would allow you to kind of move the pages how you see fit. That's not the case. I don't understand why. That's just how things are. So I would recommend uncheck both of those. It'll give you a little bit more flexibility within your document. And now what you can do is you can take this spread from the bottom and put it up to the top. Now I've got my spread there. I'm going to undo that really quick and show you what happens if you do something wrong. So notice here how you've got a line and it's sort of spreading across the top versus here, it kind of looks like it's connecting to the other page. If you do this, you're just going to end up in the same spot you were before, just in a different orientation. Okay? So be careful. It can get a little bit frustrating if you do it wrong. Just keep trying until you get it right. Also, if you're like me and you have old eyes and you have to wear glasses, and I can't see any of you Come down here to panel options. And here you can select how big, relatively speaking, you want your pages to be. You can have them be jumbo, and that's quite large. Personally, I usually set mine just to large. I think that that's just slightly easier to see than medium. So I'll drag this up, connect it there. Now I have my spread. Okay. So setting up our grid here for our manuscript grid, I've got my line tool selected. It's also helpful if you have your stroke color set to something pretty easy to see. And to find our midpoint in the document, you might think that that's pretty easy. Okay, there's your midpoint, right? But what about vertically? Okay, well, I can just pull a line down, right? You can do that a couple of different ways, but I'll tell you the way to find the absolute perfect center is to go from this corner down here to this corner up here, and then do the same thing from this corner here down to this corner here. So your perfect middle, excuse me, the words are hard today. The perfect middle is right there. And that's what you want to find. From there, I would recommend change the color of your stroke so you can kind of see the individual steps that you're taking. The next thing that we want to do is we want to find, we want to find the intersection that we ultimately want to work with. And the way that we do that is we'll go from this bottom corner here to the top of the page, because we're looking for the intersection on the individual page that we're ultimately going to work with. So we'll do that. Do the same thing on this side.
So what are the alignment feature work good here as well? Like when you can just center something on the page based on the alignment?
That's not quite what we're looking for. What the alignment tool is great for a lot of things. I'm glad that you even know the alignment tool exists. A lot of people get to the end of their graduate degree and they don't even know it's there. But what we're looking for is sort of an optically pleasing center, not a mechanical center or a practical center. So we're using sort of this mathematical equation is sort of what we're building here, because it's going to change depending on the size of your page. And then you also can make it flexible enough to where you can have a much smaller grid or a much larger one. So it's sort of a flexible grid. So there we now have an intersection on both of these pages that will become a optical center of the grid that we're going to be using. So the next step, again, you're going to notice me sort of changing colors of my stroke quite a bit here. You'll go from this intersection straight up to the top of the page, right there. And then this is the stuff I always have to remember. What did I do? Okay. Yes, okay. This is the hardest part to remember because your brain is automatically going to want to think it connects to something on this page and it doesn't. So again, grab another line and it connects to this page here. So this intersection on this side, you'll then draw it up to connect there, okay? Where am I going with all of this? This point right here, that one right there, that's going to be the point at which your text box starts. Okay, so I'll hit T on the keyboard. I'll start drawing in my text box. And you want your text box to align with this green line. So the corner, it goes from corner to corner. And you can take that as far as you want. It's scalable. So if I wanted it to be way down here, that's not exactly pleasing. Oftentimes, you want it to be a set width. So here I'm setting it to 6 inches in width, but that's going to give me a slightly odd size in height. That's normal. So once I have it on this side, what I then recommend doing is you can set up various layouts within InDesign, and you can create what are called master pages or better yet, they're often referred to as master or parent pages. So if I'm planning on using this manuscript grid on several pages, let's say I'm designing a 400-page book, I'm going to need to reference that grid several times. Okay? So I want it to be not a bunch of lines on the page. I just want it to be a square where the square ought to be, right? So a good way to do that, use your marquee tool, hand on the keyboard, draw from the top to the top of the page to the top of the grid there, and then come over to your layout, go to margins and columns, and it's going to give you this little pop-up window. You can see up here that the height of this box is 1.2 inches, so I want the top to also be 1.2 inches. We'll hit OK. Then we'll do another marquee tool. Draw from the edge to the edge of the box, right? Edge of the page to the edge of the text box. Go to layout, margins and columns, and we'll set the width on this one to be 1.56 on the outside. Okay. Grab another marquee, draw from the bottom of the text box to the bottom of the frame, the artboard, I should say. Layout, margins and columns. Bottom, I'll set this to the height of 2.04. Okay. And then here, do the same thing. And the width is 0.94. Set that on the inside. There we go. So now, if I get rid of all of this on the page, and I hit Command: I now have my manuscript grid set up. Okay? Now the benefit of this is that you can use this in several different ways. If you wanted this to just have text all the way across the column, hang on. You can do that. And it's, depending on the size of your text, probably not too much, right? It's not filling up the whole page. This is how most books are designed. Maybe not magazines, but books. Alternatively, if I wanted to change the layout, I could come back to margins and columns, and maybe let's do it in two columns, right? So we'll have a 2-column manuscript. So now I can do this and that, connect this guy to that guy, boink, like that. And now I have a 2-column manuscript, right? So you can actually combine various types of grids together. So here I'm using both a manuscript grid and a columnal grid, columns, right? Alternatively, there are other types of grid as well. There are radial grids. There are what are called unigrids or modular grids, right? I'm showing you this one just because there are very few resources that are going to show you how to do this. Most other grids are relatively easy to set up. So for example, one of the things that I started working on over the weekend, and of course it's going to be a little bit problematic. Sec. When in doubt, open it again. Something that I've been trying to work on over the weekend is creating sort of a printed catalog that we can have for the art stuff that we do. So I have set up several what are called parent pages or master pages. Back when I was in school, we used to call these master pages because that's what they used to be called. Now they're called parent pages. Don't ask me why. Actually, I know why. It's because colonialism thinks that the word master is a little bit of a problem due to slavery, and I agree with that. So we changed it to parent. Just like you would change the word master bedroom to like primary suite. So what I've done here is I've set up these different master pages with the work so that as I'm designing, I don't need to sit there and think about the grid. I can just pull from the resource library that I already have and use one of those and just drop in the content, right? So you guys are in a position right now, which is how the industry normally works. You would write your content, you would produce your photo shoot. Well, let me back up a little bit. You would write your content, you would create your grids, then you would produce your photo shoot or your illustrations or whatever it is that you needed to do. Then you would bring all of that into InDesign and start using those grids or the layouts that you created to inform how you're going to move forward. Right? And you would just drag them down. So, for example, here I have 2 pages of photos, but this is for one set or one style of photo. And I think we could all agree that if the entire book were nothing but this over and over and over and over again, that would get a little boring. Right? It would get a little bit static, a little bit predictable. I'd probably lose your interest pretty quickly. So we can create several variations based on the grids that we use, right? And here, there's nothing super exciting happening. I have a 4-column grid on each side, although I'm using all 4 columns in one column, okay? So let's see what happens when we change it up and we start using those columns for what they're worth. If I add another spread, it's automatically going to default to just one of the parent pages, whatever the last parent page was that was used. But since I've spent the time to come in here and say, all right, there's one layout. Let me use this. There's another layout. There's another one. Here's another one. Right, now we can start to make a layout that feels much, much, much more interesting. Right? It can change a little bit as we go. Oh, okay, now we're flipping things on their head a little bit. I don't know why I have 2 of the same one in there. Okay, now maybe we've got a slightly bigger one on the right. Maybe we have a slightly bigger one on the left. Maybe we have a different format and they're all vertical, right? We're starting to use these grids to help us lay out the content that we're then adding to the page. And the way that you can do this is, now that I have a spread down here, I can just drag this grid to this page. Oh, hang on a sec. Let me do that again. I can drag this grid down to this page. I can use the different pages in different ways, right? So maybe I have just like this down here, but then now I switch it up to this style, right? So build your grids in the parent page, and then when you do ultimately need to use them, you can drag them down into the section, into the working section down here.
So when you do that, does the placeholder, whatever it's called, the box, does it disappear then? Does it actually replace it?
It's a template. So if I were to drag this to this page, right? It's not actually replacing any content, but you can see back here
Oh, it's still there.
that it's adding
On top
the
of
new grid on top of it. So if I want to then replace this content, it's not as easy as selecting it, right? I'm clicking right now, but it's not doing anything. You have to hold on. Yeah, okay. You have to hold Command, Shift, and then select so that you can then do Command D to place. Maybe I do that one. Give it a second. They're PSDs. They're quite big. It is the wheel of death. Yes, I have a few too many programs running at the moment. There we go. Okay, now we're placed. Also, your images might come in a little bit larger than you typically want them. If your aspect ratios of your frames are set up correctly, you should be able to do Command-Alt-Shift-C in order to get it to crop to the size of your frame. Okay. I can then also do Command-Shift and Command-Shift-Select in order to unlock the text box. Come up to my links. There was a couple of questions in Slack about links in InDesign. This is what I mean by links. Links are any external resources that you are then adding to your document. You shouldn't really be dragging and dropping content into your document because that's making your file size so much larger. You are literally adding the file size of whatever it is that you're dropping in there versus just saying, oh, I have this file here, go and get it. right? So a link is linking the file path to the file, okay? That way, if I'm like, you know what, I actually don't like this photo here, let me change it to this one. I can do that, and now it's relinked the path to a new file. Okay, so that's what links are. And then when you package the file, which for the record is file, package, going, save. You have to save before it'll let you package. And then I'll just put it on the desktop. There we go. What packaging is doing is it's going to all of those different places that you have those resources, because they may not all be in one folder. It's taking them and saying, great, come with me. And then it's putting it in a folder that'll be in your packaged folder. Because again, you have to think about not working with yourself anymore. What happens when you send this file to someone else? They can no longer access those images because they're not stored on their computer. They can't access those files because they're not on their computer. So packaging it and zipping it allows you to send the files along with all the links to someone else, and then they can open it and still see all the images on your site or on their site. Okay. So I saw a hand.
Oh, for you said a keybind to like automatically like resize it. Is there something like in case you forget it? Is there a way on the like,
One more time, what was the question?
You use like Control-Shift-C, I think, or something.
Oh, to crop it?
Is there
So
a way to the
there is. So let me do it on this one. So here, there's a couple of different ways. You can right click. I don't normally do it this way, so give me a second. Zoom. Nope. Oh, maybe they got rid of the right click. Hang on.
So actually, no, it wasn't that.
No. So maybe they changed it. That would be. No, that's zooming you out. Oh, fitting, because that is fitting. The way that it fits within the frame. So you can do fill frame proportionally. So that's the command option shift C.
That's the one you were just on, right?
Correct. So that'll fit it within the frame proportionally. You can also do fit content proportionally. I honestly don't know the difference between those. Just get familiar with one. I'm sure there is a difference, but I haven't had the reason to differentiate them. Content aware fit. That's new. We didn't have that back in my day. So I would imagine what it's doing is it's saying your image is this large, your frame is this large, find a way that makes it look, I'm sure it's AIing a lot of it, not in a bad way.
So does it have the possibility to like modify or rearrange the image as you zoom into it? Like, so
Yeah. So basically, if what I just did on that one was I dropped the image in and then I expanded the frame to fit the image as opposed to the image to fit the frame.
right.
So you can do anywhere in between. You can so that's if you want it to fit the frame in the way that you've set up the frame. If you want to literally crop the image within the frame, you can do that. You would just double click and then you can resize and you can move it around. So oftentimes what you're going to end up with, and I need to be careful with what I say here, but oftentimes you are going to okay, I'm going to set up a couple of different scenarios here really quick. So let me stop sharing. When you are working in the industry, you might have several scenarios. One, you might have a bank of assets that you are to use within a publication. So let's say you're using stock photography, or there's an existing photo library that the company just constantly turns to. That's one example. Another example would be that you are creating something and you then commission a photographer to, or an illustrator or someone to do work for that design. In which case you or somebody would be an art director on that photo shoot, directing the photographer exactly what you're looking for. You would go in literally with your design and they would pull it up on a screen called a Digitech card, and they would project your design onto the screen and size the image how you need it, so that the shot coming out of the camera is cropped exactly to the way that you need it, right? That's where art direction comes in, right? Knowing exactly what you need before you go into that photo shoot is huge. That's how a lot of magazine covers are done. You end up with someone who, they know the stories that are in there, and they've already designed their headlines that are going to go around the edge of the magazine cover. And then they go into a photo shoot and they execute that photo shoot to fill the space that they have available, right? Rather than it being the other way around, where you would normally get like, here's a photo, great, now design around it. No, that's not how it works, usually. And then a third scenario would be that you might get a little bit of both in the sense where maybe you have some things that you're using stock photography for, and you kind of need to either composite that photography or manipulate that photography in a way that allows you to design with it. So where I was getting at with that is there are going to be different situations. In my situation that I'm working with here, I have very strict aspect ratios that I shoot my images in, right? Every single photo that I publish always comes either as a 1:3 aspect ratio or a 6:4.5 aspect ratio. Those are stylistic decisions that I've made as a creative, that every single image will abide by those rules. So because of that, I am also abiding by those rules within my book that I'm designing, right? That may not be the case in other scenarios. For example, I did a bunch of digital ads, and each ad is a different size to fit in different spaces. So some are super, super vertical, some are super horizontal, some are square, some are rectangular, some are vertical, some are horizontal. And that's so that you have a lot of variation that you can test with and figure out which ads work. And in those situations, because the image is literally everywhere, we had to shoot super, super wide and kind of have a bunch of clear space around the edges so that we could crop creatively as we needed to within those ads. So this is where a lot of, it's interesting because I have a bunch of photo video students that get to my 450, 550 class. And they will, when we have a project with them, one team will be art directing that team. And they're like, this is wild. I just want to do the work that I want to do. And it's like, that's not how it works. Every single photographer will have an art director that they have to satisfy. You're not just going in and like, oh, here's my creative vision. No, it's, there's a plan for that shoot. There should be a plan for that shoot. All right. Another way that you can do that is, if you remember C and E, you can almost scale anything. So Command-Alt-Shift-E, Command-Alt-Shift-E will, it's doing it a little bit differently because I have my frame set up to my aspect ratio. So if I change that aspect ratio and do that, notice that the size of the image is now completely contained within the aspect ratio. Versus if I do Command-Alt-Shift-C, it's going to crop that to the frame. It's going to fill the frame and crop it. Okay? Yeah.
Is Command-Option or Command-Alt?
Sorry, Command-Option. That's my PC and Mac brain getting a little screwed up there. So for Mac, it's gonna be Command, Option, Shift, C or E. And then for PC, it would be Control, Option, Shift, C or E. Don't quote me on that.
Control Alt.
Control Alt,
There's no
okay.
option in.
Yeah.
Oh, Control Alt Shift E or C. Got it. Cool. Okay. What else am I missing here? There are some different. One of my personal favorite types of grid. Let me go pull up an example here really quick. I actually collect these, and I'm a little bit mad at myself. I meant to bring in a couple of resources today, and I didn't grab them off my desk. Has everyone seen one of these? You guys know what that is? These are national park maps. These were designed by, they were originally designed by Massimo Vignelli. The system was designed by Massimo Vignelli. And what they use is something called a unigrid. There's an example of the fold out of a map. And this is, by and large, how the grid looks. It's a series of basically equal size squares. And what you can do with these is, hang on, let me set up the camera a little bit differently so that the online folks can see me. Nope. Yeah, we'll do that. Actually, that's not gonna work. We'll do it this way. Okay, you guys can see my mouse okay? It's a little hard to see, but actually, I can do it this way. There we go. Okay, so here you'll always have the name of the park right at the top. Every single park across the United States, there's 62 of them. The name will always go at the top, followed by an image that will usually take up the next 4 squares. Like that, okay? That creates a visual system that when the card is folded up, you always know that there's the name of the park and an image that corresponds with that park. From there, once you unfold it, you can then say, all right, I want text in these 2 boxes wide by these 3 boxes tall. And then maybe we put an image in these boxes here. So the grid is not rigid to the point where you need one thing in each of these individual boxes. You can expand it and use each of the boxes collectively, but the boxes are there to give you something to align your design to, right? So a couple of different, there are a lot of different names out there for different kinds of grids. Find a source that you trust and use that as a Bible. I have a whole book in my office that is nothing but grids. But there are a couple of different names for them. Obviously, we went over a manuscript grid, also known as a Van der Graaf canon. You can have a columnal grid, which is exactly what it sounds like, commonly used for like a newspaper. Everyone knows what a newspaper is?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
I hope so.
Let me. So columnal grid, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, 5, 6. You get the picture, yeah? So if this is a page, right? Maybe I decide, okay, I want my text to take up 2 of these columns. And then I want an image to take up 2 columns. And then I want, maybe I want a blank column to give some relief. And then maybe this column is my citations. All right, that's gibberish. There we go. That way online can see that a little better. Does this make sense to everyone? Similarly, you could just as easily say, all right, you know what? I don't want that space there. I want to use these 3 columns for text. But maybe instead of doing that, I want to use individual columns, right? Okay, so text here, text here, text here, and this flows to that, this flows to that, right? And then maybe this is all an image. Okay, there's a lot of different ways that you can sort of think about putting this together.
Would that be considered a design system or?
No. Or design systems are reusing it. Grids can be part of a design system for sure, but they are not the design system.
Style guide?
No, style guide is totally different. So a style guide or a design system is taking elements and reusing them, right? So our button, let's say it's a website, right? Our button is always rectangular, but we round this corner and this corner, right? That is a stylistic choice. Now, maybe we also say it's red, and we use this color red. That's not red, that's white. No, sorry, that's black. But once you start building this out, you start getting what's called a design system. When you have a decision that is made for every single thing that you could possibly do, that is a design system.
What would you call this then?
Grids are grids. Grids are grids.
That's like the thing you adjust right before you make the page, right?
Correct. So we can also do this in a website. Actually, every website should do this, right? Most websites, if they're desktop, are built on an 8-column grid or a 12-column grid. 8 is a little bit more common. 12 is also an option. Similarly, for mobile, you would probably design that on like a 2 or a 4-column grid, although you would almost never use 4 columns. 4 columns makes things way, way, way too small.
Very narrow.
Very narrow, yeah. And also, you can't read text if the grid is, even if it's broken up into 2. So on mobile designs, your text column is always going to span, if you have a 4-column grid, it'll always span all 4 columns, right? You want on mobile that full width. I can't stress that enough. A couple bits of terminology for you. When you're working within a grid, any space where text is going, or text or in any sort of, anywhere where you would traditionally add content, image, text, illustration, doesn't matter. That's often referred to as the live space. There's a couple of other names for it. We can call it live space here. Some things that don't have alternative names are this space here. The spaces in between like columns, or sometimes it might be rows. If it's a manuscript grid, or I'm sorry, back up. If it's a modular grid, so kind of like the unigrid that I showed for the national park maps, you might have these running horizontally also. These are called gutters. Just like you would have outside in the street gutter, these are gutters. They kind of control the way in which the type flows, right? A nice way to think about them is that they are there to sort of line the edges of the type boxes, just like a gutter is there to line the edges of a street. Okay? So gutter, let me oh, good. This one we probably all know already. I'm probably annoying people with OCD. I also have OCD, so it's great. This green space around the edge that would oftentimes be contained within the page, that is called your margin. We all know what bleed is at this point, yeah, so that's the area that runs outside the frame. You can also have what's called a baseline grid. That gets a little complex. I'll be honest, I think baseline grids suck. But there are good use cases for them. Baseline grids are established. I'm probably going to misspeak here, so read the blog that I threw into your guys' lab. But essentially, where you establish your base size of your text, like your body text typically, 8 point, 6 point, however you want to determine that, a baseline grid would then run across your entire page to keep a baseline of that text, and it would be at the height of whatever your base text is. So if it's a base point of 6, then your line height here would be 6 points. And each row, let's say that you did have a headline that was 24 points, rather than it would take up those 2 spaces, no matter what the height is. The height would be whatever you set it to. But then the next row of type, let's say that this extends slightly under that, the next one wouldn't start until right here. So it's kind of forcing you to stick to a very rigid grid, which I am not a fan of. But baseline grids exist. They're also obnoxious to set up, but set one up. Do it once, and then you don't have to go back. There are radial grids. I think there are some occasions where radial grids might be. Everyone get here? Yes. Okay. There are some occasions where radial grids might be helpful. Mostly, I would say in something like information design. If you're designing a chart that has a lot of content, it can work. I can't say it's maybe the best. I also haven't found a situation in my career where a radial design was like the right choice.
The baseline grid, so is that 6 point, like, it's not the font size, it's like the letting, like the size of the.
So when you're establishing a base grid, or a baseline grid, I should say, it is using the size of your text to establish it's using the base size of your text to establish how far to space out the lines. So in a way, it is kind of establishing the letting for you.
Yes.
Within your text styles, or your paragraph styles, I should say, you can actually set, don't ask me what page it's under because I never use it. You can set to, I think it's written as like rigidly apply to baseline grid or something like that. And if you check that, that's what's going to hold you to that grid pretty rigorously. Yeah.
Could you define the baseline grid? Like, I'm a little confused about it.
Yeah, so actually, I think I could better show you.
And then show us the radial one.
I will. In fact, I think I might do a better job at showing you a radial grid on here. Column grids are kind of a simple thing to illustrate. So if I'm setting up I'm going to do it on a different file because I don't want to this one up. So here I have a page, and if I go to this part is different depending on if you're on Mac or PC. I think if you're on a PC, you have to go to edit and then find preferences. But for Macs, you can go to the InDesign. Wait a minute. Where is it? There it is. Click on the InDesign text up in the top left there. Go to Preferences, Grids, and then here, this is where you can set up your baseline grid, and it works half of the time. I'm not going to make any adjustments here, but essentially, you're setting up your base point size here. So here it's using picas, unfortunately, but you can set up your horizontal lines every 6 points or whatever. And hang on, go to view, create some guides, show baseline grid. Voila, there is your baseline grid. So now, if I add a text box in here, okay, so I just wrote some text in there. If I come over here to my paragraph styles, and I change my basic paragraph to, give me a second, gotta find it. Down here under align to grid, you can set all lines. And then if I did a return, notice that it's, rather than it starting at the next line here, it's actually starting at the line below it. That's kind of what a baseline grid is doing. Unless I were to come up here and reduce this, it'll jump right back up to the next line. It's not going in between, right? So a baseline grid is going to hold the baseline of your text consistently to a consistent spot within the grid. Some people argue that it creates consistent spacing. I think it creates a lot of ugly shit. But that's my opinion. Was that helpful?
Yeah, so your first line is good, but what if you want to expand and make the second line bigger? Would that still?
Let's do it. Let me just fill with placeholder text. That way we have some more text to work with. So you're saying right here, I want to make, hold on,
The second, any line that.
make this line bigger.
Yeah.
This is why I don't like baseline grids, because now you have things that are running over the top of each other. Maybe I'm just the idiot. I don't know, but I absolutely cannot stand what this does to text. Even if I go in there and I space it out, this gets all a little wonky. Not that this is a practical application for any grid, but when you want to control something, even if I'm in here and I'm like, okay, let me, whoops, this is a headline. Make that 24 points. And we'll make it bold. Okay, so that's there. And I'm just going to set these up as separate text boxes so that you can even see how that works. Oops, sorry. Okay. So notice how even if I move this text box up a little bit, it's still sticking to that baseline. So you're not actually controlling where the text is placed. The grid is controlling where it's placed. And this is a little too restrictive in my opinion. Now, that said, because even if I come in here and I adjust the leading, I have no control over it. Your grid is controlling the entire thing. I'm going to state my sort of philosophical opinion about grids, and then we'll sort of take it from, we'll leave it where it is. Grids are really, honestly, I use a grid for everything, absolutely everything. But one thing about design is once you know the rules, it then becomes your job to figure out how to break the rules, right? But still have just enough of the rules to make it work. And the thing with grids is they can tend to create very rigid structures, very rigid pages, very rigid designs. So oftentimes what we have to do is most of our design needs to adhere to some type of grid in order to make that design logical. But from there might be certain areas where we choose to break the grid for very logical reasons, right? Just like if you were paving a street there might be a reason why you chose not to put gutters on that street, right? Just like you may have chosen not to put sidewalks on that street, right? Whatever that decision might have been, maybe it was unsafe, maybe it didn't look good, maybe it whatever, right? There are very similar applications in print design. Sure, maybe you're not dealing with someone's safety, but maybe it's just a visual appeal thing, right? So I say first, learn how to use a grid, learn how to stick to a grid, and then once you've learned the rules, you can then choose to break them, right? So like I was saying, personally, if you look at, by and large, any of my work, you're going to look at it and you're probably going to see either a manuscript grid or a column grid or a unigrid or a road grid, basically a columnar grid turned horizontal. Yeah, that's pretty much what you're going to see. And that's because those allow for the greatest amount of flexibility. That's just my style. Now a radial grid, exactly what you think it is. It's designing in a way that is appealing within a circle, right? Not quite the golden ratio. That's not quite a, although the golden ratio can be a radial grid. I'll be honest, I haven't had a single instance in my entire career where a radial grid kind of made sense. This is a good example here. That's kind of cool. Perhaps a little impractical, but it works. Yeah.
The like typographic assignment, like when we made the thing, I feel like that could be like some like hair or something. Or
yeah, absolutely. If you ask me, this is more of a eye-catching, sort of interesting design. There is a point to which this kind of becomes unrealistic though, because as soon as the text is no longer broadsided and it starts going the other way, it's then upside down. And then, yeah, you could go in and you could flip it manually. I don't know, radial grids. I'm biased. Now, actually, I should rescind what I just said. I literally just designed something with a radial grid. So hang on, I would never personally design an entire page based on a radial grid, but I mean, this here, that's a radial grid. I'm just using it for a sticker, right? I'm not using it for a page. That's a radial grid, right? So there are applications for them, but I'm not exactly doing anything super creative with a radial grid. I'm making a fucking sticker. So, yeah, that is, for the most part, I would say the types of grids you're going to need to know. I would really encourage you guys as you're going through this. I know there's not a whole lot of time to do it, but just do some rapid ideation. I sketched several grids on the board there. You saw how many I had in that document. I literally made that last night while I was sitting on my couch. Just, it doesn't take much. That's what the grid is there for. Set up a grid and then create your layouts. It's there to hold you in a little bit. And this is the thing. I think a lot of what we've talked about in this class is like what not to do as a designer, right? And I mean, frankly, we have one more module where I'm going to tell you a little bit more of what not to do, and then the gloves are off. The idea with that is that guidelines and restrictions for designers are actually a good thing, right? Who's ever gotten a paper assignment from their English teacher and they were like, write whatever you want, right? Like, whatever topic you want. Did anyone find that paralyzing? I don't know what to write about, right? As designers, there's even more that we're not just writing assignments, we are designing them. We have kind of unlimited cosmic power at our fingertips. We can do a photo shoot, we can create an illustration, we can make a website, whatever it is that we want to do. So we need a little bit of limitation so that we don't feel like we're just spinning into nothing, right? So also part of the reason why the deadline is super tight now is because one, I think that it would be way more beneficial for you guys to have more time to work on your passion project than this, right? This may or may not go in your portfolio, right? I don't care about that. I want your passion project to be something that you care about. We're just getting you the tools that you need to get where you need to go. Cool. Any questions? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Earlier with the newspaper columns you were going over, would you recommend that as like a way to start for your like magazine, like the layout?
A columnar grid is probably one of the most ubiquitous grids that you can possibly have. And obviously then the unigrid is kind of a descendant of that. And really, actually kind of working our way back here, a manuscript grid or a Van de Graaff canon is kind of the basis of a lot of different grids. It doesn't work in all situations. I certainly wouldn't use a Van de Graaff grid as a cover for a magazine. Well, I shouldn't be so limiting. It would be more challenging, in my opinion, to use a Van de Graaff grid as a magazine cover. But a columnar grid, yeah, if get out of my way. If this is my magazine cover, and I have, let's say, let's see how many I can actually fit here. Also, I've been a little bit of a stickler about sketching with pencil and paper. I'll be honest with you guys, I don't even sketch with pencil and paper anymore. I sketch with a whiteboard and markers because it's a lot less consequential in my mind. So if it's helpful for you guys to get a little whiteboard and sketch on that, I have a big one at home just because I think it's easier. But then you also have to be really good about documenting what you've done because a whiteboard is not a permanent workspace. All right, what is that? 6, 7 columns? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So I've got a 7-column grid. Ideally, I'd like to have 8, but it's in my mind, it's easier to work with even numbers, even though the rule of odds is often a little bit more pleasing. So in this situation, we can do a lot of things. In magazines, oftentimes what ends up happening is your text needs to interact with an image of some sort, right? Who's your designer? Great, I have no idea what their work body includes. Let's choose Alphonse Mucha, just for shits and giggles. Art Nouveau artist, right? Lots of flourishes, lots of big sweeping text, lots of hair that has a lot of curls. We could easily, someone share my screen here. Let's go look at their work for a second. Oh, come on. Look at the job poster. This will work. Or this. Actually, I like this one better. You've got this nice figure right in the middle. It might be worth taking some time. I think for a magazine cover, if you're going to add text to something, I think this like floral background is going to be a little bit difficult to add text over because you're not going to be able to read that text. So what I would recommend is go into Photoshop, clip out Miss Beautiful here, and I don't know, she's kind of got this sitting pose where she's kind of sitting. This, a little bit of a hip in there. And then shoulder comes out this way. Okay, so maybe we clip her out, let her fill up that space, right? And then maybe we have text you want to think about, okay, oftentimes on a magazine, the name of the magazine, or in your guys' case, the journal, is often the biggest. And you want the image and the name of the magazine, because those are going to be the things that are often most recognized, to be cohabitant. You want them to interplay, right? So I don't know how you've designed your logo, but maybe if you've got Alphonse Mucha here, it's going to be something very scripty, very swirly, very swashy, right? So maybe we've got ran out of space. Right? Like nice and big, fills the space. Let me stop sharing the screen. That way online can see. There we go. So we've got headline, we've got our subject, our model, and then maybe there's some pull quotes from your article, right? So maybe we've got something, we've got this nice negative space in here. There's one, and then we've got this like empty space down here. Oftentimes on magazines, it depends. One of the requirements is that you guys have indica availability, which is the mailer signature that goes on the back. It's often just a blank space where filler text, or not filler text, your mailing text can be added there. And then the indica stamp is kind of that stamp that goes in the corner that's like postage, hey, like that. Okay, so that's your indica. And then on the front, maybe you have like a think about holding devices for your text, right? If we look back at my candle, I put the number 1 in like a round shape and then put range and focus on either side. That's kind of an example of a holding device. So maybe we can have like a big seal or something that goes there. We'll want to fill in some text on this side. Maybe it's another pull quote. So now we're kind of using the space, right? And it starts to feel good. But had I just slapped the image in there without cutting this person out, maybe it's like that kind of green color in the background with like a beige margin. It's going to look so much more interesting, especially if this text is like both in front of and behind the model. That's what creates a really interesting magazine cover. Now, some of you guys may not have the luxury of something like Alphonse Mucha, where you have a person as a subject, which creates automatic interest. Maybe you have, was it El Lozinski that did the like 45 and 90 degree? Yeah. Do you have El Lozinski? Is that why? Yeah. So then you're just going to have blocks of color, but you have a beautiful modular grid to work, right? So then you have to lean into something a little bit different. So in that case, sorry, my page is oddly sized. If that's my page, you're automatically going to have like, okay, a big giant red square there, probably a big blue square here, some white, some black, you get the picture. Okay, well then can I use that white space to then fill in my text? Right? So every single one of you is gonna have to think about this cover very differently.
So if you were to like make that magazine cover on the right, you would like have a box for the image first and then move them around. Okay.
Yep, but I mean, there's a significant amount of pre-production that has to happen here in the sense that you're probably gonna need to go into your image, cut out the model so that you can get rid of some of using the pen tool, so that you can have some of that free space to add all of this. Otherwise, if you're adding all of this over the floral arrangement that's in the background, you're just making noise at that point, right? So you're gonna have to train your art directive eye a little bit for this assignment. Yeah.
So for our magazine cover specifically, do we make any design based on our choices, like can I place let's say the logo at the bottom and like so it's up to me.
Yeah, I mean, you want to follow conventions to some degree. Something to think about. Does everyone know what like a magazine card is? No? Okay. Oftentimes in like a big city, or actually, hang on, let's go back. You don't even need to be in a big city. Who's been to a Barnes and Noble? You've seen the magazine section? Homework for everyone. Walk into a magazine store, a bookstore, whatever. Go to their magazine section and look at how they're stored on the shelves. Oftentimes they're layered like that, right? Magazine 1, magazine 2. So if you put your logo in that bottom left corner, what's happening? It's getting covered, right? And what are the two things that, if you are going to a magazine store, what's the magazine you're looking for? You're looking for Vogue. You're not looking for the model that's on the front of the magazine, per se, right?
But wouldn't that count as creating like, I don't know, curiosity about what the magazine could be, and you're just like, let me see what it is.
You can't defy convention. Our little fucking mouse brains are always looking for convention.
Yeah.
And there are times to defy norms. And then there are times where you need to retain convention in order to get that recognizability. Now, for example, if I were designing a billboard, my logic then changes. Because if I'm designing a billboard, what do I want the last thing for people to know as they're driving past that billboard? What brand it was, right? So at least if I'm designing in the Western world, if I have a billboard, something like that, I'm gonna put my logo right there. Why is that? Because we read from top left to bottom right. So that's going to be the last thing you see as you leave the billboard. So yeah, you can get creative depending on the application, right? And you're going to have some designers that are like, no, I want the logo to be the first thing that they see. Well, you have to earn that. So if you put the logo up here, and then the rest of your content is down here, they're going to see the logo, see the cool visual that you made, and then forget who it was made by. So that's the general idea. Cool? Feel good? No? Ask questions. What do you need to know?
It's not more about knowing what it is, it's probably just in my head, like too many things happening. at the
Sort
same
of
time.
conceptualizing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's
It's more just trying to ideate and then kind of get to a point where I feel comfortable with it.
guys, this is one of the things that who came into this program straight from like another design program? Anyone? One person? Architecture, right?
That was me.
Oh, that was you. Okay. Okay. So notice that very few of you guys are coming in from another design program, right? You have to get your reps in. It's like going to the gym, right? Before you can get good at the sport that you're doing, you have to go to the gym and you have to train, right? So what we're doing here, why I'm having you come up with so many iterations, is so that you can flex those muscles, right? You can train those muscles. And realistically, also part of it is there is one question that every single interviewer is going to ask you when you go to get a job. What is your process? And if you tell that interviewer, well, I come up with an idea and I execute that idea and problem done. You're gonna be the first person that gets a no. Every single time. Because what have I said before? This industry is not about the one idea that you got across the finish line. It's about the 30 ideas that are still sitting in the trash can. And you have to document that process. You have to say, well, this was the design that made it across the finish line, but these were the 30 that I thought were really good and I would have rather have done. Right? Maybe not rather have done. Don't show any client something that you wouldn't be happy with doing. But you are going to have opinions. You're going to have opinions about your work. You're going to want to, you're gonna have favorite children, right? When we create an idea, we can easily look at something and say, I really like this one better, and you will at some point get to a point where, and this only happened to me actually at this point it was over a year ago, where a client's gonna ask you, these are all good, which one do you like? I love hearing that because I may not always think that my opinion is the right opinion, but I always think that my opinion is better than yours. So that is a really kind of humbling opportunity when a client's like, we want to know what you think, because then you can steer the conversation. And alternatively, since then, I have learned that you can also say, here are the 3 options that we're presenting to you. Here's the 5 options, the 12 options, whatever the options are that were written out in your scope of work. You can say, here are those options. We really think that this is the right option because of this. You can steer. And clients will disagree, and that's okay, but at least you got your voice in, right? But again, even if you're presenting 12 options, never put anything in front of the client that you wouldn't be willing to execute. Questions? Good? Go make some magazine covers. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good one online.